Webinar. My name is Paula Hyman from the Ohio LTAP Center, and I'm going to be your technical support today. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please type those into the questions box, and our presenter will address your questions. This webinar is being recorded. Providing that the recording is successful, the YouTube link and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to all participants and uploaded to our LTAP website. We also have a copy of the presentation in the handout section for you. I want to thank you in advance for your participation, and with that, I'll pass things off to Mr. Andrew Shepler, Federal Grants Coordinator with ODOT. Andrew?
Thank you, Paula, and thank you all for joining us today. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about discretionary grants and how things have changed since the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So when the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law passed in 2021, the amount of funding available for discretionary grants grew really exponentially. Not only did existing programs receive an increase in funding, but a ton of new programs were also created. Add to that, the Inflation Reduction Act and annual appropriations bills have just added even more funding and more grant programs out there. So we're looking at more than 50 different discretionary grant programs. In 2022, that number for the amount that's available is 39 billion, not 29 billion, because of the Inflation Reduction Act. The future years of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, it's more around the $29 billion that is showing up on the slide. And so with the level of funding that is available, demand is extremely high. My goal as ODOT's Federal Grants Coordinator is to bring back as much of this funding as possible to Ohio. And so today I'm going to talk through some lessons that we've learned over the last year as these programs are being implemented, and also present some resources that we've made available to help locals apply for grants. So now that we've had more than a year of increased discretionary grant funding, the biggest thing that I've observed is that everybody is really trying to figure this out as we go, and that especially includes USDOT. With so many new grant programs and the different requirements that go along with that, they're trying to get their staff up and get the programs released as quickly as possible, but we have seen a significant number of delays just with all the new programs. Even with over $29 billion in funding available per year, there still is significantly more demand for these programs than funding available. And so that has also led to delays in announcing awards because the amount of applications is so high that need to be reviewed before awards can be announced. And from the programs that have announced awards, I will say that partnerships have been a key element, as well as projects that are multimodal. So I definitely recommend exploring partnerships whenever possible. So as I said earlier, my goal is to bring back as much funding as possible to Ohio. And I know the font here on this slide is small, but that is ideal because that means we have a lot of projects being awarded in Ohio. So over the last year, more than 1.9 billion has been awarded in discretionary grants to Ohio projects. There have been 33 awards so far, and the biggest was a 1.6 billion award to the Brent Spence Bridge. To give you an idea of the types of projects that USDOT is selecting, I wanted to highlight one of the projects that received an award, which was the US 6 Connectivity Corridor in Erie County. This was an ODOT RAISE application that included construction of a portion of the Sandusky Bay Pathway, 5 new roundabouts, adding a 2-way left turn lane on a portion of US 6, constructing a multi-use path along US 6, and constructing a multi-use path along Rye Beach Road. And so this application had a lot of strengths that I want to highlight. First, it was a multimodal application. It improved highway, bicycle and pedestrian, and railroad assets all on the same project. And second, while ODOT was the submitter of the application, we had partners in both local government and the private sector. Erie County, the City of Sandusky, the City of Huron, and the Erie Regional Planning Commission were all heavily involved in the application and provided matching funds. From the private sector, we had Cedar Fair and Lake Erie Shores also supportive of the project and provided private funding towards the application. And lastly, the project had bipartisan congressional support. So you're probably thinking, how do I get access to some of this money? And so ODOT has put together some resources to help you prepare to apply for a grant. And thankfully, you don't need Jerry Maguire to help you out. I'm going to talk through these resources and some tips on how to use them to apply for grants. The first step in the process of applying for discretionary grants is to get an idea of the different grant programs. Our discretionary grant website, which is on this slide, transportation.ohio.gov/BIL, provides our discretionary grant booklet describing the different programs. I'm keeping this booklet up to date as information is being released by USDOT. I will highlight that the document is more than 200 pages, but I've tried to organize it in a way that makes it easy to find the specific information you're looking for. Of course, if you want to read all 200 pages, feel free, but I don't expect that many people would want to do that, and you're kind of going to be looking for specific information. And so I'm going to talk through how it's laid out to help you with that. So each grant program in the booklet will have a cover page that looks like this with basic information about the grant. It provides a basic description of the program, how much funding is available, who is eligible to apply, how much match is required, and other information. This first page is really intended as a screening page to see if the program is of interest to your agency. And if it is, you would look at some of the following pages. So for each grant program, there are two more sections of information. The first, as seen on this slide, is the types of projects that are eligible for the grant program. So if you read the first page, you think you have a project that might be eligible for this program, you can go to the next page and see if it does indeed qualify. And if it does qualify, you would go to the next page where you can see the selection criteria that USDOT is using to find out if your project will be competitive. So once you've looked at the grant opportunities and you find some you want to apply for, the next thing to do is to find out when the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, is expected for that grant program. USDOT has a listing of expected NOFO dates on their website. I have a link to it here on the slide. And ODOT's discretionary grant website, transportation.ohio.gov/BIL, also has a link to that page as well. So what I will mention is that the ODOT website tries to have all these links that I'm talking about all in one place. So if you just remember one website, it's transportation.ohio.gov/BIL. I also want to highlight some of the upcoming solicitations that are on this slide. So the first round of the PROTECT program, which funds projects to make the transportation system more resilient, is expected this spring. The Transit-Oriented Development Pilot Program is expected in May and funds planning for transit projects to create compact mixed-use communities with easy access to jobs and services. The Multimodal Project Discretionary Grant, or MPDG, is actually 3 different grant programs combined. It's the Mega, Infra, and Rural programs, and that NOFO is expected in spring. And the last one on here is 2 programs. It's the Reconnecting Communities program and the Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant program, and they are expected in late spring. The Reconnecting Communities program already had 1 round of funding, while the Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant program is a brand new program from the Inflation Reduction Act. These programs provide planning and construction grants for projects that reconnect communities that were divided by the development of a transportation facility like a highway. So you found some programs you want to go after and you have an idea of when they will be released. Step 2 in the process is to start doing some work before the NOFO is released. You usually only have about 2 to 3 months to put together an application once USDOT releases the NOFO. The very, very, very important first step is to get registered in SAM.gov and on grants.gov ahead of the NOFO coming out. This process can take about a month, and without being registered in SAM.gov and grants.gov, your agency cannot submit a grant application. I know of multiple examples of agencies putting the effort into putting together a grant application, but not getting registered in SAM.gov and grants.gov ahead of time and not being able to submit their application. So I highly, highly, highly recommend getting that done as soon as possible if you are interested in submitting a grant. Next, I recommend starting to think about the project and how it supports the selection criteria that USDOT has outlined for the program. The more data you can collect showing the project benefits and how it supports the selection criteria, the better. This will assist both with the application narrative and the benefit cost analysis if the grant program requires one. Lastly, I recommend starting to talk with project constituents in your region to build support. The more support you can get from elected officials, businesses, and the local community, the better. Once you've completed step 2, you're ready and waiting for the NOFO to be released. One resource on our website is a listing of the current NOFOs that I'm regularly updating. And this listing is at the bottom of the page and provides a link to the grant application in grants.gov, the amount of funding that is available, and when applications are due. Once the NOFO is released, it's really a sprint to put together an application and submit it before the deadline. It's important to read the NOFO carefully. USDOT usually puts a recommended outline for the application in the NOFO and specifications on on the page limit and all kinds of other details. So following this outline and the page limit is very helpful for the USDOT reviewer. The NOFO often poses very specific questions as well that USDOT wants answers to. So it's important to answer every one of these questions, again, to make it easier for the USDOT reviewer. They have a lot of applications that they are reviewing, and the easier it is for them to find the information that they are looking for, the better it will be for when they are scoring your application. It's also important to back up your assertions with as much data as possible. If the program requires a benefit cost analysis, it's important that it's technically sound and easy for USDOT to reproduce. You should also document all assumptions that were made. Lastly, I recommend requesting letters of support, both from the local community, as well as state and federal officials to show a wide range of support for the project. Related to that, if you want to get a letter of support from ODOT, there is a form on our website. We ask that the requests are submitted at least 14 days prior to submitting your application to give us time to process the request and get the letter signed. We also request that you submit a draft copy of the application and a template letter of support. Once you hit submit, it's time to wait a while for USDOT to review the applications. It will be months before the application reviews are completed and awards are announced. I will highlight that USDOT sometimes will email questions about your application during this review period, and they give you a good amount of time, usually a day or two, to respond. So you need to keep an eye on your email for these requests so that you can respond to them in the very, very short time period that they give you. The next step in the process, hopefully, is step 6C, which is to celebrate getting an award. Enjoy the win and get ready to implement the project. This picture is from the RAISE Grant Award. It was just announced in August for the US 6 Connectivity Corridor, which is the project I was talking about earlier. And so we are always willing to discuss partnerships and collaboration on projects, so please don't hesitate to reach out to me with ideas. As I said earlier, my goal is to bring back as much funding to Ohio as possible, and partnerships are a great way to make that happen. USDOT Secretary Buttigieg, when he came to Sandusky to highlight this project, specifically mentioned partnerships as one of the reasons why the project was selected for an award. Alternatively, if you do not get an award, the next step is step 6D, which is to debrief with USDOT and try again. Applications are often unsuccessful on their first attempt, but USDOT will provide a debrief on how your application scored and what can be done to improve the application for the next round. You can use this information to prepare for the next round of the program or to apply for a different grant program. One other resource I want to highlight briefly before taking questions is ODOT's Discretionary Grant Newsletter, which is a new newsletter that I started a couple of months ago. It provides updates on recent awards, current solicitations, upcoming solicitations, and upcoming webinars. I have a link to sign up on this slide, and I'm sending out new newsletters every couple of weeks. And with that, here's my contact information, and I will take any questions that you have. So let's see here. The first question that I am seeing, can you speak on the requirements of BCAs for funding applications? Does ODOT provide any assistance support for those to be completed? We are concerned about the high cost of having to complete a BCA for every project we're planning to submit. So ODOT does not provide direct assistance on completing BCAs for applications. You are correct about the high cost of having to put them together. There is an extremely high level of resources that goes into these. We are happy to provide guidance and provide examples that will help you in putting together a benefit cost analysis. I'm certainly happy to talk to you about them, but in terms of actually putting them together for you, that is not something that we would be able to do, unfortunately. So is there an easy way to see the applications for projects that have been awarded funding? The short answer to that is no. US DOT does not directly publish the applications that received funding. However, oftentimes the applicants do have them on their website. So if you look at the list of projects that were awarded and do a Google search of them, sometimes you can find some of the applications, but there's no one place that you can find all the applications that were awarded. So those were the two questions that I see in the questions pod. I will certainly pause here and see if anyone else has any questions though. I am not, oh, here we go. So this question is from someone not from Ohio. Any suggestions on getting grants for ADA improvements? So I would definitely recommend taking a look at the discretionary grant booklet on our website. And I think you could probably find some different grant programs that might be eligible. There's a variety of caveats. It really depends on where the project is, what kind of project, how much it costs, and a variety of other factors to determine which programs to look at. And that's why that booklet I find to be very helpful. So I would recommend taking a look at that booklet to find some potential opportunities for ADA projects. Not seeing any other questions at the moment. Hopefully that means the presentation provided good information. Do you have any suggested funding sources for villages outside an MPO? I guess I would ask a clarifying question of funding sources for what exactly? There's no one answer to that question. So general corridor improvements. I think my answer is probably going to be the same as it was for the ADA improvements question. It really depends on a variety of factors. And so I'd recommend taking a look at the grant booklet. If there is a very specific project you have questions about, I'm happy to take a look at the project and give you some guidance. So feel free to email me project specific information and I could certainly take a more detailed look at it.
Andrew, no other questions have come in.
Okay. So I certainly thank everyone for their time. Hopefully this was beneficial. And with my contact information on the slide, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that come up later. If you have any ideas for projects to partner on, certainly happy just to have discussions with you on those. And just thank you for your time.